The Jets have their quarterback. If Justin Fields is going to succeed in New York, it's on him to develop as a passer, but it's also on the Jets coaching staff to put him in spots that play to his strengths. Justin Fields is a Jet, and we'll break it down today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, March 11th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week. We have a big show today. Free agency is underway. The legal tampering period began on Monday at noon Eastern, and that's really the start of free agency. And the Jets entered the legal tampering period without a starting quarterback, and just a few hours in, they found their starting quarterback. It is Justin Fields, a former member of the Chicago Bears and a former member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a player the Jets actually passed on in 2021 with the second overall pick to select Zach Wilson. Fields was picked by Chicago later in the first round. The Bears traded up for him. Things did not really go well for him in Chicago, and he was traded to the Steelers last year. He started the first couple of games, but was unable to beat out Russell Wilson. So it's been a rough go of things for Fields. One thing I will say, though, is despite what happened last year in Pittsburgh, the Steelers apparently wanted to keep him. The Jets and Steelers got into a bidding war for Fields. The Jets ended up landing him on a 2-year contract worth $40 million, so $20 million per year. And of that $40 million, $30 million of it's guaranteed. Apparently, the Steelers were only willing to go as high as a 2-year deal for $30 million, so $15 million a year. And only $20 million of that was guaranteed. So the Jets win a bidding war for Justin Fields. And I'm not going to lie, this is a little bit more expensive than I thought it would be. I did not think Fields would cost $20 million a year. But if you look at the going rate for a starting quarterback in the NFL, it's still pretty affordable. You know, that's at the low end of guys who are not on a rookie contract. So I can't get on the Jets for the amount that they spent on Justin Fields, because they're not paying Fields franchise quarterback money. They're paying him low-level starter money, which is where he is at this point in time. But for me, like, the money is not the main issue, because they didn't go crazy. You know, I was expecting him to be more like 12, 13, 14, $15 million a year, but that's just a few million dollars off. And at $20 million a year, you know, you're not paying him to be the face of your franchise. What you've done is you've essentially paid him to be a competent starter. And if he's more than that, well, then you've got yourself a bargain in year 2, because he's only going to cost $20 million. And if he's worse than that, then you've set yourself up with, you know, an overpayment in year 2, because $20 million, even if it's not franchise quarterback money, is still money you're expecting a competent quarterback play from. But, you know, when I looked at the horizon of this offseason, Fields was the guy I kept coming back to. The best combination of quality play and upside that was out there. And I think, as I mentioned, it has not been, there's been more bad than good for Justin Fields so far in his career. But when he's been good, when he's played at a high level, he's played at a legitimately high level. He's the type of guy where you see his good stretches and you say, you know what, if he could do that consistently, we might be onto something. And that's kind of like the direction the Jets should be going in this offseason. I mean, I'm not a big believer in this year's draft class, to be honest with you. So I think that the rebound play is the right play. I mean, I think one of the things that's become clear in the NFL is that teams are too quick to give up on quarterbacks. Teams draft these quarterbacks. They're expected to, like, save the franchise on their own. And there are some guys like Justin Herbert who step in and are ready to play day one. But there are other guys who really need time to adjust to the speed and complexity of NFL defenses. They need time to adjust to an NFL passing game. They need time to adjust to, you know, being a professional, leading a professional football team. I mean, even Patrick Mahomes did not start as a rookie, but coaches are desperate to save their jobs. Coaches view a first-round quarterback as a career maker, and so do GMs. You know, they don't provide the necessary support for these quarterbacks. And we've seen this over and over in recent years. You want to talk Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. The Titans resurrected his career after a disappointing stretch with Miami under Adam Gase and Joe Philbin a little bit. You want to talk, Baker Mayfield, who's been up and down through his career, but when he's been in good situations like he is now in Tampa, he's done well. When he's been in bad situations like he was a couple of years in Cleveland, he's done poorly. And then the two Jets guys, I guess we could call it the two Jets Seahawks, because Geno Smith resurrected his career with Seattle. got traded to the Raiders over the weekend and is being replaced by Sam Darnold, another early round Jets disappointment. Sometimes it takes these guys 5 or 6 years to figure out how to run an NFL passing game. Now, will Fields succeed? Look, the odds are against him. Despite everything I just said, it's always difficult to get a guy to turn his career around. But look, good quarterbacks don't grow on trees. There's no established quarterback who's on the market this year who's affordable for a team like the Jets. So you kind of have to take a calculated gamble, and that's what Fields is. He's got a tremendous set of physical tools, and he's had some degree of success. I think at this point you'd say he's probably is like a low-level starter, high-level backup. So what does Fields need to do? Well, Fields needs to become more refined as a passer. And look, at the end of the day, coaching can help you, but the biggest help comes from yourself. Fields needs to miss less reads. Fields needs to show more pocket presence. These are things that have been issues for him in his career in the pros. But I will say, while coaches can't do it for you, I hope that the Jets have a plan for Justin Fields, because this is a player with kind of a unique skill set, because he's not a terrible passer, but he's a guy who like misses more reads, misses more throws than you'd want typically in your starting quarterback. But he adds an extra dimension because he is an incredibly talented runner of the football. And what I'd like to see Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrand do is build a system around those traits, build a system around the things he does well that kind of hides the things he doesn't do well. So I think, you should see a lot of run pass options, get the ball out of his hand quickly, allow him to make a quick read. I'd like to see, designed runs for Fields, maybe some option runs where he either gives the ball to Breece Hall or keeps it himself. This could be the type of player who unlocks Breece Hall and takes Breece Hall's game to the next level. Get Fields on the move, call bootlegs. The bootlegs are usually easy passes to hit, but if your quarterback is a capable runner, sometimes he can tuck it in, run and gain a big play. These are the types of things that I want to see. I don't want to see the Jets just have a traditional drop back passing game with Fields, because first of all, that's not, you're kind of wasting his talents. If you're not utilizing his ability as a runner. And there's one criticism I have of Fields, aside from the stuff I mentioned, is I think sometimes he's a little too hesitant to run. So there are a lot of like quarterbacks who are gifted runners who maybe run too early in plays. If they don't see what they want, they just tuck in and run. Fields, I think, sometimes leaves running lanes open. So I think that that's an area where he's going to have to. I'd like to see him improve, and we're going to find out right off the bat how good Tanner Engstrand is as Jets offensive coordinator, because he's got a guy with ability. He's got a guy who hopefully has learned. Hopefully can start making good on his natural talents. And look, if it works out, Fields could conceivably be a guy who's the Jets quarterback for a couple of years. I know a lot of people aren't that excited by him. And I can understand that. There were no perfect options this offseason. There's never a perfect option out there. I'm just a big believer that this is not the draft class you want to go with, especially with sitting at the 7th overall pick, especially without a top 2 pick this year. So, I think that this was probably the best play the Jets had when you combine ability right now and when you combine potential upside. I think this was the direction to go for the New York Jets. I don't think it's an unreasonable. $20 million is a lot, but relative to other quarterbacks, it's not an enormous sum, and gives the Jets a legitimate shot. They've got a quality pass blocking offensive line. They got to work on the wide receiver position, but you start with Garrett Wilson, who, by the way, played with Fields for 2 years at Ohio State, so there's some natural chemistry there. You got Breece Hall. So look, we got to work on the skill positions, but you do have a starting point there. I think that this was the right move for the Jets. Look, it's going to take a calculated gamble. I think this was probably the calculated gamble for the Jets to take. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, Jets weren't finished by just getting their quarterback. There is a shakeup in the secondary, and I think in one area the Jets got stronger, and one area the Jets got weaker. We'll break down the Jets secondary moves as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, but with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and more affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. We spend money on gym memberships and healthy food. Why not invest in our mental well-being too? Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day, and a big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Free agency is underway, and the Jets are off and running in free agency. You know, normally that first Monday of the legal tampering period, I like to see my team stay quiet because this is when a lot of the foolish money is spent. I don't think the Jets gave out any really, really outlandish contracts on Monday, but they were active. They signed their new quarterback, Justin Fields. There also is a shakeup in the secondary. So the Jets lost DJ Reed, who has been an excellent number 2 corner the last couple of years, a guy who I think you could make a strong argument has played at the level of a number 1 corner, and given the Jets such an advantage at that position. Reed goes to the Lions in free agency on a contract worth about $16 million. And to replace him, the Jets made a signing. They brought in Brandon Stevens, who is a corner from the Baltimore Ravens. He's been a starter in Baltimore the last 2 years. Stevens gets a 3-year, $36 million deal. And, you know, a lot was made before the end of the season about DJ Reed being ready to leave. You know, obviously it has been a difficult 3-year stretch for the Jets with DJ Reed. I will say this. I hope the Jets at least made a push to keep Reed, because I do think at $16 million a year on a 3-year deal, that's the type of gamble I'd take. Now, Reed is getting into his late 20s. I don't think he finished the season strong, but lots of people did not finish the season strong for the Jets. I do think, I do worry about how he'll age because his game is very athleticism based. But I actually kind of like that. I kind of like that move for the Jets if Reed was willing to stay at $16 million a year. And you could question whether or not, he'd fit Aaron Glenn's defense. Well, Aaron Glenn's old team wants him. So that, I think that tells you something. Brandon Stevens is brought in to replace Reed. He'll be the number 2 corner across from Sauce Gardner. My views on this signing are a little bit nuanced. I don't hate the idea of bringing in Brandon Stevens. He's a bigger type corner, so the Jets, I think, are going to play a lot of man-to-man this year. He's a guy who could play well in press coverage, guy with a lot of experience playing man-to-man. He manned up a lot in Baltimore. My issue with the move is the price, and it's not from the standpoint that $13 million is too much to spend on a corner, because DJ Reed cost $16 million, and I just told you it would be a good idea to bring him back. My issue is, like, Brandon Stevens did not have a good year in 2024, and I feel like a guy like him, he's 27 years old, he's a 3rd-round pick in 2021, coming off kind of a disappointing season, not as good as the years past. That's the kind of guy who should be kind of like a reclamation project. That's the kind of guy who probably should come at a discount. And if Stevens is as good as advertised, if Stevens is as good as the Jets are expecting him to be, and look, I think part of this is Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks is the defensive coordinator. They looked at him and they said, you know what? We can work with him. We can coach him up. We like his tools. We'll turn him into a great press corner. And, when we're this early in a regime's existence, it's difficult to say, like, whether or not that's a good idea, because moves like that come down to whether or not you trust the people in charge. We got to late in the Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh era, and I'll tell you straight up, I did not trust those people. We were in the Adam Gase era. I did not trust Adam Gase. Mike McCagnon, Todd Bowles, I did not trust them. It's a little early to have a sense whether or not we should trust Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilks, and Darren Muji, just to find a project player like this, because he in theory, physically, he's built like a guy who could be a good press corner, and he's had some degree of success playing man-to-man. It hasn't been spectacular, has been inconsistent, but if they can coach him up, that's going to be a good deal. The question is whether or not they can coach him up. And I look at this player and I wonder why they needed to give him $13 million a year. I think he's the type of guy who should have had to settle for like a couple million a year. And, if you don't get this guy, it's not the end of the world, because he's kind of, he's a borderline reclamation project. If it works out, it works out. No one's going to complain about it. But my views on this are a little nuanced. There was another move the Jets made in the secondary, however, which I feel much stronger about in a positive way. The Jets signed Andre Cisco, who spent his career to this point with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Cisco's 25, and he's another guy coming off kind of a disappointing season. Jets got Cisco for 1 year, $10 million, so not an outrageous amount at all. I like the fit. I like the player. Cisco's a guy who had 3 pretty strong years to start his career and then was kind of disappointing in 2024. So let's unpack this. Cisco is a safety. In recent years, the last couple of years, he's primarily been like a deep center fielder. He's been a guy back in the back of the deep. Maybe I shouldn't say deep center fielder because you can also play deep in a too high look. But he's a guy who spent most of his time in the back of the defense. And Aaron Glenn, as we've talked about on the show, he's going to bring in a defense that's heavy blitzing, heavy man to man. So you're going to have when you play man to man, usually you have one deep safety in the middle of the field. And when you're blitzing a lot, you're going to play a lot of man-to-man because you just don't have enough people. If you're sending more pass rushers, you don't have enough people to stay back and clog all the passing lanes. So you got to play man-to-man. The guy who plays single high in that look, the guy who's the one guy who's deep in the middle of the field, he's an important player because this style of defense makes it very difficult to get interceptions. Because when you're playing man-to-man, you can't look at the quarterback. You can't read his eyes. You're looking at the guy in front of you. So the Aaron Glenn defense, the heavy blitz defense with man-to-man coverage, it's a defense built on pressure. It's a defense built on getting sacks. Those are the types of negative plays they try and produce, opposed to the Robert Saleh defense, where the Robert Saleh defense was very zone heavy. So when you're playing zone coverage, you're just defending an area of the field. You can look at the quarterback. You can read his eyes. You can break on the ball because you'll have people near you who can make tackles. And also like they're big on, because you have so many guys back, like the first guy, you're trying to force fumbles because first guy makes the tackle, second guy goes for the strip. Different splash plays in Aaron Glenn's defense. It's going to be more about blitzing. It's going to be more about the sacks, successful blitzes, and tight man-to-man coverage. But the one guy who can read the quarterback's eye is the deep safety. And in Cisco, the Jets got a guy who did not do well in 2024, but it's coming off 2 seasons before that where we had 3 and 4 interceptions, which not the biggest total in the world, but if you have a guy who's a consistent 3 to 4 interception guy in the back of your defense, that can make a difference because that's like the one area where you'll be able to get interceptions because that's the one guy who's able to read the quarterback's eyes. And Cisco had a down year, so that kind of dropped his value. So, I think about the profiles. I talk about this a lot, the profiles of players that I like. I like guys who are in their mid-20s. I like guys who are getting their second contracts. So I guess you could argue both Stevens and Cisco fit that bill. But I like there to be a reason where maybe they're not getting as much as they should. I don't think that was the case with Stevens. I do think that's the case with Cisco. And Cisco had a bad year in Jacksonville, but you know what? I've said this about a lot of Jets. And the situation in Jacksonville may have been even worse than the one in New York. There are lots of guys in that Jacksonville team who underperformed last year. Just there are lots of guys in New York who underperformed last year. And I think that at some point, maybe just the organizational dysfunction overpowers everything. And, otherwise good players kind of get swept under in that. So I'm willing to give Cisco a pass on that. I think the Jets got him on a very reasonable deal. And if he succeeds, then, they can keep him around. And if he doesn't, then, it's going to hurt the team this year, but they'll be able to move on pretty quickly because it's only a 1-year contract. I think the Jets have probably downgraded at corner and upgraded at safety. And they needed to sign safeties because they only had one guy under contract entering free agency. So the Jets needed to go get us, and they still need to add a couple more safeties. But the first safety has been added. It's Andre Cisco. That during the Locked On Jets podcast, Jets also are going to say goodbye to some people. There are some players who signed with other teams, and I don't think many tears will be shed about a couple of these guys. We'll talk about, and there will be some tears shed about one of them. We'll talk about who the Jets lost on Monday as we continue on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, so you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Tuesday. We're breaking down the opening day of the legal tampering period, which is really the opening day of free agency in the NFL. We already talked about one player the Jets lost. That's DJ Reed, who goes to the Detroit Lions on a 3-year contract. But there were some other players who departed from the Jets, one of whom opens up a pretty big hole. And there are going to be a couple guys nobody's going to miss, but there is one guy I think Jets fans will miss, and that's Morgan Moses, who departs the team after his second 1-year stint with the team. He was a member of the Jets for 1 year in 2021, then left for Baltimore, came back a year ago in a trade. Well, Moses departs again after 1 year with the Jets. He signs with New England for a 3-year contract for $24 million. I've gone back and forth on Moses because he's a quality player. He's a great locker room guy. He's still playing pretty well, but there's been some clear decline. There's clear signs that his body might be breaking down. On the other hand, I don't really know who's better at the right tackle spot, and this does open a legitimate hole for the Jets. Jets have a tough job to do at right tackle because there were no real obvious options. Even bringing back Moses was a risk, and New England giving him a 3-year contract. We're still waiting on the structure of the deal, but my guess is that there was a pretty robust market for Morgan Moses because there were reports about it. And I'd be a little hesitant about giving a 3-year contract, giving a multi-year contract to a 34-year-old who's shown some signs of decline. Now, the question is who replaces him. The best thing I can say for the Jets is that 4 of their 5 offensive line spots are pretty much settled. And that's not something we've normally been able to say at this time of year. Normally, we're talking about replacing 3 or 4 offensive linemen. So Jets will need to figure out right tackle. Morgan Moses is off the table. He's heading to New England to play for the hated Patriots. And Jets will need to figure something out there. I think a lot of Jets fans will miss Morgan Moses. The next 2 guys, I don't think they'll miss as much. One guy who nobody will miss is Hassan Reddick, who, had one of the most disastrous stints a player has had all decade with the team. A half a year stint with the Jets where he held out. Once he got on the field and ended his holdout, he pretty much did nothing. Reddick settles for a 1-year contract worth $14 million, $12 million guaranteed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah, I guess Hassan Reddick's gambit did not pay off. He wanted the big multi-year contract. He had to settle for a 1-year contract with Tampa Bay. I don't know what else to say. That trade was a disaster for the Jets. It was one of the worst trades, one of the least productive trades a team has ever made, or a team has made in recent memory. Jets gave him a 3rd-round pick for a guy who didn't want to be here and really showed very little effort. If you watch the film on him, this was a guy who really was just collecting a paycheck. Once he set foot on the field against the Pittsburgh Steelers, it was just. Or once he set foot, I think it was the week after the Pittsburgh. I think it was the day of the Pittsburgh game. He ended his holdout. Then he joined the team the next week. But Hassan Reddick, nobody's going to miss him. His Jets career, he will not be remembered fondly in Jets lore. He'll be a cautionary tale. Nobody thought he was coming back, and Jets will need to figure out a new defensive end for next season. And then there's one other guy the Jets lost, and this was maybe the most confusing contract of the day. Javon Kinlaw agreed with the Washington Commanders to a 3-year contract worth $45 million, and $30 million was guaranteed. And I'm looking at that saying, what on earth happened there? Why did Washington give him that contract? This is Javon Kinlaw. I can't imagine watching the film on Javon Kinlaw last year when he's making $7 million. How many times did I complain about Javon Kinlaw making $7 million? A lot. I thought that was a terrible contract the Jets gave him a year ago, and they guaranteed $7 million to him. I can't imagine watching the film on Kinlaw last year and coming to the conclusion that guy's pay should be doubled, because that's essentially what the Washington Commanders did. They gave him $30 million guaranteed. And by the way, when I see the Kinlaw contract, any reservation I have about the Jets paying Jamie Sherwood is decreased, because at least the Jets got a good player on that contract in Jamie Sherwood. Why on earth? I'll let David of Locked On Commanders figure that one out. But I couldn't believe Javon Kinlaw got $30 million guaranteed. I can't believe he got a $15 million, double his salary from last year. Javon Kinlaw. You saw how bad he was. He was terrible. He was okay as a pass rusher, but he wasn't great. And he was a horrible run defender. He may have been the worst run defending defensive tackle I've ever seen. And Washington decides to give this guy 15. I'm glad the Jets aren't doing this, because I feel like there have been a lot of points this time of year where the Jets give out a contract like this, and I'm like, what on earth is going on? It's another team that makes me say, what on earth is going on today? Because Javon Kinlaw should have an invite to training camp. He should be lucky. He should feel lucky to get any guaranteed money, and Washington gives him $30 million. I know Adam Peters, their GM, came from San Francisco. And it seems like the San Francisco guys are like really loyal to the guys they drafted, because Robert Saleh was always bringing in guys like Kinlaw and Solomon Thomas, who were draft picks from San Francisco. So maybe Adam Peters, their GM, just like can't let go of a take he had when he liked Javon Kinlaw. But I mean, I was looking at this and I was almost wondering whether, maybe that was the explanation. I also wondered, like, maybe it was the explanation that Washington mixed up Kinlaw with somebody else. Maybe they mixed up two names. Maybe they mixed up the name and thought Kinlaw was a different guy, because that's the only way I could figure out why you'd give Kinlaw $30 million guaranteed. Congratulations, Javon. You've I don't know if you've earned it, but you now should be set for life, because you just got $30 million guaranteed from Washington, and I have no idea why, but that's Washington's problem. That's all for today's episode on the Jets. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on the podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody. I'm sure you'll be spending a lot of the day trying to figure out how Javon Kinlaw got $30 million guaranteed, but we'll be back tomorrow. We'll reconvene and maybe discuss more on how Kinlaw got $30 million guaranteed, in addition to some other Jets news.